Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into the relationship that, well, really defines human health.
Hmm.
That is the crucial connection between biochemistry and medicine.
Right. And our source material, it calls this a wide two-way street, which I think is a perfect analogy.
A two-way street. I like that. So it's a fundamental partnership that drives, pretty much all biological discovery.
It is, and that's really key for anyone starting out in the health sciences. Our mission for this deep dive is to trace that whole journey.
Okay, so where do we start?
We'll see how biochemistry went from, believe it or not, a surprising lab accident right up to the age of, personalized genomics.
And the whole time, we're tracking one central idea.
Exactly. A simple principle. Health depends on a harmonious balance of biochemical reactions.
And disease is just a symptom, an observable symptom of something going wrong with those molecules or processes.
That's it. Abnormalities in the chemistry.
And look, this isn't just some academic background, right?
Not at all.
This knowledge, this sort of seamless flow of information from, the lab bench to the bedside.
And back again. That's the key part.
Exactly. Back again. It's absolutely essential for the rational practice of medicine. But to really get a handle on today's biochemistry, we have to go back.
Way back. Over a century. To a time when scientists were, fiercely debating if life processes could even happen outside of a living cell.
Right. And that debate was really dominated by one person, wasn't it?
It was the titan of microbiology, Louis Pasteur. He was adamant that processes like fermentation.
So turning sugar into alcohol, like with yeast?
Precisely. He maintained that required the yeast cell to be entirely intact. It was all tied up in this idea of a vital force of the living organism.
So if that was the dogma, how on earth did it get overturned?
Well, this is where the story gets really fascinating and honestly a little messy.
I like messy.
So in 1899, you have the Büchner brothers, Edward and Hans. They're working on yeast extract, but they weren't trying to change biochemistry at all.
What were they trying to do?
They were actually trying to create a cell-free tuberculosis vaccine.
Okay, so totally different project.
Totally different. And to preserve their yeast extract, which is just the guts of the cell without the walls, they used a really concentrated sugar solution, a common preservative.
So they pour the sugar into the crock with the yeast extract.
Exactly. And overnight, well, the scientific equivalent of a volcano happened.
A volcano.
The extract just started bubbling like crazy. It fermented, filled the room with the smell of alcohol, and spilled all over the edges of the crock.
And that dramatically proved that fermentation could happen without a living cell.
It was a spill that launched modern biochemistry. A single, complete accident that just kicked the whole field wide open.
It let them study life's processes in a test tube.
And that started what our sources call the avalanche of discovery.
And I imagine the findings came pretty fast after that.
Very fast. Once you have a cell-free system, you can start identifying all the critical players.
So things like?
Well, we suddenly learned about the central role of inorganic phosphate and the currency of energy ADP and, of course, ATP.
You really can't overstate the importance of finding those molecules.
Oh, absolutely not. By analyzing the reactions, investigators very quickly mapped out that foundational process for energy, glycolysis.
The path from glucose to pyruvate.
Which then led to understanding fermentation, to ethanol and CO2. Glycolysis became the first complete biochemical map ever drawn.
And that initial spark just kept going for decades. By the 1930s and 50s.
They were identifying entire interlocking systems. Huge things like the energy-generating citric acid cycle and the essential path for detoxifying nitrogen waste, which is urea biosynthesis.
And they also figured out the roles of cofactors and coenzymes.
Yes, which you can think of as specialized tools, like little wrenches that enzymes need to do their jobs.
And critically, a lot of these come from vitamins in our diet.
That's right. Things like thiamine pyrophosphate or coenzyme A. Without those tools, the whole pathway just stops cold.
The technical evolution of the field is just as amazing, too. How do they figure out these incredibly complex structures?
Well, initially it was tissue slices and animal models, but the real leap came with new analytical techniques.
Like chromatography?
Exactly. Chromatography to separate mixtures, analytical ultracentrifugation to measure the mass of these giant molecules. But the most transformative tool, probably, came after World War II.
That would be the radioisotopes.
The radioisotopes. Carbon-14, tritium. Yeah. Using them as tracers.
Yeah, the tracers. So you could tag a molecule and just follow its journey through a pathway.
Got it. Researchers use them to meticulously trace every single step in cholesterol biosynthesis. a pathway with dozens of steps that would have been impossible to map otherwise.
And then to actually see the structure.
For that, X-ray crystallography was the key. It let scientists visualize the three-dimensional structures of proteins, enzymes, even viruses.
And once you can see the precise atomic arrangement, you can start asking really specific questions about what happens when that structure gets changed.
Which is the perfect segue to the other direction of that two-way street.
Right. We've seen how lab work informs medicine. Now, let's look at how studying a disease can, fundamentally light up a biochemical mechanism we never understood before.
This is the mutual advance in action. Our sources point to sickle cell anemia as the classic, most powerful example.
Where the clinical symptoms are just immense. The painful crises, the organ damage.
Immense. But the molecular cause is minuscule. It's a single difference in the amino acid sequence of the hemoglobin protein.
One building block out of hundreds.
Just one. And it causes the hemoglobin to polymerize, to stack up when oxygen is low.
Which deforms the red blood cell into that sickle shape.
And studying that specific abnormal protein, it didn't just explain the disease, it provided foundational knowledge for all of protein science. It proved that a seemingly tiny molecular change can have catastrophic consequences for the whole organism.
We can even trace this idea back further, right, to the early 1900s with a physician named Archibald Garrod.
Yes, Sir Archibald Garrod, an English physician studying patients with these very rare conditions.
And it wasn't the rarity of the disorders that struck him, it was the pattern they followed.
Exactly. He realized these seemingly unrelated conditions, like alkaptonuria, were genetically determined. He coined the term inborn errors of metabolism.
His big insight was that each disorder represented a specific, blocked metabolic pathway.
Meaning the patient was missing a crucial enzyme. They couldn't complete one specific chemical reaction.
That's incredible. He basically laid out the roadmap for the entire field of human biochemical genetics. He showed that genes dictate the enzymes that drive metabolism.
A more recent example is familial hypercholesterolemia.
This is the disease with severely high cholesterol and early onset atherosclerosis.
Right. But studying the genetic mutation that causes it went way beyond just cholesterol management.
It did, because the problem wasn't just about making too much cholesterol, it was about the failure to take it up from the blood correctly.
So studying that mutation gave us this deep essential understanding of cell receptors and how cells pull molecules across their membranes. Our understanding of receptor-mediated transport would be years behind without it.
And we see this principle constantly, even in cancer research, by studying oncogenes.
The genes that drive uncontrolled cell growth.
We end up learning an enormous amount about the mechanisms that control normal cell growth.
It becomes very clear. This foundational scientific understanding isn't optional for medicine. It's mandatory. It promotes curiosity and lets you identify the abnormal because you rigorously understand the normal.
Let's explicitly connect this back to health. The World Health Organization has a broad definition, but biochemically, we can really distill it down.
We can. Health is simply the state where those thousands of complex reactions inside and outside our cells are all proceeding at optimal rates, in harmony.
And maintaining that harmony ties biochemistry directly to preventive medicine.
It does, because for those reactions to work optimally, you need the right building blocks, the essential amino acids, fatty acids, minerals, and of course the vitamins for those cofactors we mentioned.
Which is why biochemistry provides the entire scientific framework for nutrition.
And today, we're systematically applying nutritional approaches, often informed by genetics, to prevent major diseases like atherosclerosis and certain cancers.
So conversely, almost every disease you can think of.
Electrolyte imbalances, hormonal disorders, toxic agents, genetic defects.
They are all, at their core, a manifestation of some abnormality in genes, proteins, or those biochemical processes.
Which brings us to the biggest leap in modern molecular science, the Human Genome Project, the HGP.
The mission to map the entire genetic blueprint of humanity.
And the speed was just astonishing. The
Right.
complete sequence was basically done in 2003.
Only 50 years after the DNA double helix was described.
It gave us the ultimate reference library.
The power of that library is, it's hard to overstate.
Think about it, the ability to isolate and sequence any gene, or to use gene knockout experiments to see what happens when it's gone. It's given us entirely new perspectives on evolution and radically sped up finding disease-related genes.
And we also get insights from model organisms.
Right. We can manipulate the genomes of things like yeast, or fruit flies, or zebrafish.
Which share a surprising amount of genetic material with us.
They do. And it lets us model complex human diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's, giving us clues we could never get from studying humans directly.
The HGP didn't just give us a sequence, though. It created a huge cultural shift. It kicked off this whole atomics explosion.
Yes, the comprehensive studies of entire sets of molecules.
So this is where synthesis is really key. The genome, that's the static blueprint.
Right, but the products are dynamic. So we start with transcriptomics, the study of all the RNA transcripts. That tells you which genes are actually switched on right now.
And from there, we move to proteomics, the study of the complete set of proteins, the proteome.
Which is inherently way more complex than the genome or the transcriptome,
Why is that?
because the proteome is so dynamic. Proteins can be chemically modified after they're made, and they have to fold into these precise 3D structures.
So one gene can produce many different functional proteins?
Exactly. So analyzing the proteome is a massive challenge, but it gives you the clearest possible snapshot of what's functionally happening inside a cell.
And the third major pillar here is metabolomics.
Right, the study of all the small molecules involved in metabolism. It's like the metabolic fingerprint of a cell or tissue.
And these core fields have their own specializations, things like lipidomics, glycomics.
Nutrigenomics, which is how nutrients affect gene expression, and pharmacogenomics, using your genetic info to pick the best drug for you.
And to handle all this data, I mean, the sheer amount of it must be staggering.
It is. We rely completely on bioinformatics for the collection, storage, and analysis of all that biologic data.
And the impact is everywhere, from sophisticated molecular diagnostics using DNA probes to
Advances in engineering, like nanotechnology, developing nanoshells, these tiny structures that could one day be used for super-targeted diagnosis or cancer treatment delivery.
and of course stem cell biology, which is all about harnessing the potential of undifferentiated cells.
But the absolute frontier, the field that combines all of this with engineering principles, that's synthetic biology.
Synthetic biology. This is about building new, custom biological functions that don't exist in nature.
Exactly. The source material gives a really compelling example.
Which is?
The potential to create living organisms. At first, small bacteria, from genetic material in a lab, engineering them to carry out specific tasks,
Like what kind of tasks?
like efficiently cleansing petroleum spills, or synthesizing drugs on demand inside a bioreactor. It's truly about engineering life for utilitarian purposes.
That brings us completely full circle, from an accidental spill in 1899 launching the field, to now designing life to clean up our messes.
It's an incredible journey.
So let's quickly recap the fundamental takeaways for you, the listener.
Okay. First, biochemistry is the indispensable basic language of all the biologic sciences. It is the lens through which we view life.
Second, remember that health depends on that harmonious balance of reactions. Disease reflects specific abnormalities in those reactions, which allows for targeted treatment.
And finally, a sound, deep knowledge of biochemistry is absolutely essential for the rational, evidence-based practice of medicine and all related health sciences. It's not optional.
So given all this accelerating progress in genomics, in the omics fields, and in synthetic biology, this raises an important question for you as a future practitioner. What ethical or technological challenges will you face when the ability to engineer and customize biological systems, even small bacteria, becomes commonplace, not just in labs, but in clinical and environmental settings? That's something profound to mull over.
It certainly is.
It
A
is.
warm thank you for diving deep with us on this essential chapter.
We'll catch you next time.